Recently I have been on a Fear Factor binge. For those of you who don't know much about it, it's a game show that is hosted by Joe Rogan. They select a handful of challenges that involve heights, races against time, eating disgusting things, being surrounded in bugs, etc. It's pretty addictive. At the end of the show, there is only one person remaining, and they are awarded a cash prize of $50,000. I had spent quite some time watching this show. I burned through all 7 seasons in just a few weeks. I was too cheap to buy them on DVD, so I just torrented them on my laptop. When I got to the last available episode, I noticed a file on my computer titled Season X. I didn't think much of it at first. I assumed it was just a collection of deleted scenes or bloopers. There was only one episode in the folder, so I clicked the play button, and the show began as usual. Immediately I noticed something was off. The host wasn't the familiar Joe Rogan. No, it was the familiar chubby actor by the name of Philip. I knew this episode was going to be strange. That was far from the truth. As usual, there were 6 contestants, 3 men and 3 women. Generally, they would act so confident and positive they were going to win, but these people seemed totally scared. It was as if they didn't willingly sign up for this game. They all looked malnourished, skinny, pale, and tired. Each one of their eyes sunk into their sockets. Their cheekbones stuck out of their skinny faces, and you could see their ribs sticking out of their skin. Each character was briefly introduced. Josh, Brandon, Evan, Sarah, Marie, and Joanna. They each had the same exact outfit on. White pants, white shirt, and white shoes. Some of the males weren't even wearing shirts at all though. They all had the look of terror on their faces, something of which I'd never seen before. I was deeply disturbed. The first challenge was all 6 of the contestants standing in front of a large pit that was covered with a sliding mechanical lid. Each of the participants stood there, almost emotionless, until the lid slid open. The host stood and watched over them with a menacing grin on his face. Something told me this was going to be bad. The lid to the pit finally slid all the way open. It was full of needles, rusty razor blades, and glass. At the other end was a measly bottle of water. That was it. I couldn't see why anyone would be willing to go through 25 feet of hell just for a bottle of water. Before I could even finish my thought, each one of the contestants dove headfirst into the pit. They scrambled and fought, trying to get towards their goal. Josh and Evan were head to head, leading the race. I watched in horror as Joanna grabbed Marie by the hair and was repeatedly slamming her face into a pile of glass. Brandon gained on Josh and Evan as they were in a full-on fist fight just out of reach from the bottle of water. The 2 leaders didn't even notice as Brandon passed by and got a grip on the bottle. He didn't get any more than a drink until Sarah came right up behind him, latching onto his back, and she sunk her teeth deep into his shoulder. Brandon barely winced, but it was just enough for him to squeeze the bottle tight, and the water shot out all over him. They all collectively shrieked in despair as they leaped to lick off all the water that Brandon was covered in. Each of them tore at his skin with their fingernails, and the licking turned into ferocious gnawing. My jaw dropped, and a trail of drool hung from my mouth as I watched the terrifying event. My hands were shaking, and my eyes burned as if I hadn't blinked the entire time. I never felt so disturbed yet so intrigued. It was incredible. All of a sudden, a bell rang that indicated the time was up. The contestants were prompted by Philip to return from the pit. Only 4 of the 6 contestants ascended. Marie was laying face down, lifeless, with a needle sticking straight out of her neck. Brandon had been piled on, crushed by the weight of other contestants and ripped to shreds. They all watched as the lid of the pit slid shut and Brandon rolled around in pain, slowly bleeding out. Now only 4 remain. 2 eliminations in 1 round. Wow. We're going to run out of contestants before we get through all of the challenges. Philip shouted excitedly. The 4 remaining just stood there with blank expressions. Their bodies were covered in deep cuts, needles and shards of glass were stuck to their skin, and they didn't even attempt to remove them. They all just stood there, emotionless. Philip's face had morphed from a grin to a disgustingly huge malicious smile that I found almost as disturbing as the scene I had just witnessed. The screen faded black, just for a second, and then transitioned into the next challenge. Okay, you vermin, here's the next challenge. We've captured some of your closest loved ones, as you can see here. The camera panned over to a set of monitors, so they faced each other, and every contestant had their own booth. They were in a dark room. A spotlight shined down on the group, standing together while another shined upon the set of the video equipment. Now each one of you take a seat. Our team is going to torture each one of the captives for 5 minutes. You have a choice to stop it at any time. There is a red button on the armchair of your chair if you decide to do so. Let's begin. The 4 remaining participants took their seats, and the screen illuminated their faces. It didn't show what had occurred, but they were really focused on their reactions. All of them watched in horror as the video projected what allegedly was their loved ones being brutally tortured. Evan almost immediately hit the button on the armrest. A buzzing sound shot out of my speakers, and his screen went black. A masked man then approached from the darkness wielding a pistol. He then put a bullet in the back of Evan's head. Fragments of Evan's brain and skull splattered across the screen, as well as Joanna, who had been sitting next to him. Joanna didn't even flinch at the execution that had just occurred right beside her. Her eyes were locked on her screen, her face twisted into a horrifying expression. I couldn't imagine what they had felt, but just from the sight of it, I almost began to sob. The timer in the corner of my screen reached 0, and all of the monitors became dark. Okay, well I guess you 3 have made it to the next round. Let's get on with it, shall we? I was far beyond disturbed, yet I couldn't help but keep watching. There was something about the show, the people, and Philip that kept my eyes glued to the screen. My heart pounded against my chest as the screen faded to black and the next scene came into view. The 3 remaining contestants were now standing in an empty room. In the center of the floor was a crude wooden chair with straps attached to the armrests. Ropes were attached to the legs. Philip stepped forward from the darkness. Earlier I lied to you. There were actually 2 eliminations. One of you kept your eyes closed through the entire challenge. Philip then glared over at Josh, whose face now had an expression of sheer terror. That's when 3 masked men appeared from the shadows and grabbed Josh from behind. He could barely put up a fight due to the condition he was in. He managed to scream as the men dragged him over to the chair and strapped his arms and tied his ankles to the chair. Josh began to squirm and beg for mercy, but one of the masked men retrieved a syringe from his pocket and jabbed him in the neck. Josh suddenly became limp. His neck gave way and his head swung down towards his chest, but you could see he was still conscious because his eyes began to blink rapidly. Then Philip began to speak. For this challenge, you will be timed on how quickly you can eat Mr. Cheater's fingers and toes. You must completely swallow each one of them before moving on to the next. Whoever manages to complete the challenge in the shortest time is the winner. Joanna, you're up first. Joanna was frozen in place. Her eyes were wide open, and you could sense the fear emanating from her body. With a shove from Philip, she approached the now catatonic Josh. Okay, Joanna, are you ready? Joanna didn't even budge. Go! Joanna lifted up one of Josh's arms and started to bite onto his pinky finger. Josh continued to blink even more furiously as she ripped the finger off and started to chew. With each bite, you could see the smile on Philip's face grow wider. Joanna managed to eat the fingers and toes off of Josh's right side in 8 minutes and 54 seconds. Next up was Sarah. Sarah knew what time she had to beat, so she didn't hesitate to jump right into it. You could see her gag between bites as she ripped open his appendages and nearly swallowed them whole. Sarah finished Josh's side with a prevailing time of 7 minutes and 18 seconds. "Well, it looks like we have a winner," Philip announced. Joanna started to take off running into the darkness, but was soon apprehended by the sound of gunshots in the shadows. "Well, Sarah, you managed to top all of your opponents. How do you feel?" Sarah's face was blank. A trail of Josh's blood dripped down from her chin as she just stood there, paralyzed. That's when the screen cut out and a word popped up onto my screen. Fear Factory. I was shocked. I didn't know what to think, other than it had to be some sort of fucked up spoof film. The fat blonde man was a renowned actor and all, but it just seemed so real. And wasn't he dead? I ended up brushing it off as an accidental download and went on with my life. Things were rather normal for the next few days, until one day I received an email. "Congratulations! You have been selected as a contestant in our upcoming episode of Fear Factory. You and 5 other contestants will be participating for a grand prize, which will be awarded to the last one standing." I just closed out of my email. There was no way in hell this could be real. It has to be a prank, right? Shit. Someone's knocking at my door. What the hell would someone want at this time of night? I'll let you know if I find anything else out about the show. Maybe I'll upload it to YouTube. I'll do that once I find out who the hell is knocking at my door. If you enjoyed this video, please comment. Any feedback is totally welcome. And please give it a like or dislike. The choice is in your hands. And last but not least, always remember, I am the words that keeps the birds humming. Join me.